And that, I understand, speaks to, the statement that we've been hearing or seeing perhaps on social media platforms saying that KZN is burning. And I can tell you that cannot be entirely accurate given the fact that the province in itself is quite big, and of course not every part of the province is experiencing those protests. So that generalization on its own cannot really be accurate. But where we are, we're en route to Mooi River, and we've been able to pass various points from N2, northern parts of N2, where we saw trucks lining up the road with police looking or monitoring the situation. Mooi Plaza, I can tell you that police, they're stationed there monitoring the situation. As you drive down all the way to the N3, on your way to the N3, Tongati, there are also police watching over the situation. So at this point, police are on high alert given the fact that overnight there's been those riots at the Mooi River Toll Plaza, which perhaps indicates that there are parts of this province that are experiencing these protests. I mean, for example, if you look at what happened yesterday in Nkandla, there were some parts of Nkandla which were experiencing these protests. The same way also, it cannot be said that the entire province shares the same view as Zuma supporters.
Absolutely. And Linda, perhaps it's also worth getting a sense of your reading of what is actually taking place insofar as sentiment is concerned. Again, there had been a lot of, call it, praise of police for being able to carry out what is largely viewed as a peaceful arrest of the former president. There had been real fears then that there'd be bloodshed. Do you think, ironically, the bloodshed could follow his arrest, as in could come from these protests we're seeing?
Well, I'll tell you what, Ayanda, it's been quite impressive, at least from what we've experienced from certain parts of the province where police were trying to disperse crowds yesterday in various parts of Nkandla and other parts of the province where these protests had started. Police had been engaging the protesters who also were complying with the instruction. I'll tell you about a moment yesterday afternoon when a senior police officer arrived at a scene where the road had been completely closed off, with protesters saying that the only way or the only time they would be moving from that particular area is if the former president is released from prison, failing which they would not be moved. But the engagement that we saw from that police officer saying, well, the instruction is that I should arrest you, but I will give you an opportunity to disperse. We understand your frustrations, we understand what you're doing, but I would ask you and I would urge you to leave and disperse, because if you are arrested, it will certainly impact on your personal life, and you don't want that for your children, which speaks to how public order policing has been conducted over the past couple of days here in KZN, which speaks to perhaps lessons that have been learned and how the police have been treating the situation since, of course, the arrest of the former president, and how that was handled on its own.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, what is also interesting, Linda, is to note how many of the people who are speaking to the media who are part of these protests are reluctant to mention who, in fact, is organizing this and who is leading it. What do we know about what their plan is for the hours, days, perhaps even weeks ahead?
Well, many are refusing to share their plans and around how this will unfold. And as you mentioned, some are refusing to declare exactly who they are. I came across a certain group yesterday who were saying that they don't necessarily identify themselves as Zuma supporters or identify themselves as members of the ANC, even though they had been wearing ANC regalia, saying that at that point they identify themselves as concerned members of society and wouldn't align themselves to any political party or any grouping within perhaps that political party. So the operation has been very hush-hush, it has been very silent. There had been indications, at least from that group that we engaged with, that they'd be back in the morning to try and restart their protests. Many of them have been saying that you speak to some, who were part of the Zuma supporter group who were in Nkandla around what their plan is, and they're saying, well, the protests are continuing in various parts of the province, and we cannot declare what our plan is. So it gives you an indication of how, underground these operations are and how they start. So we cannot also say these are sporadic. There's a level of planning that goes into it, and how it will be executed and the time at which it would be executed, given the fact that also police have been making arrests from those people, at least in part of the grouping of those people that are starting these protests.
Linda Mnisi is live to us there from a stretch of the N3 road in KZN. Linda, thanks very much indeed.